Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Sally. If you are new here, thank you so much for stopping by, and if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for sticking around. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make this princess dart dress with bubble hem. If this looks like what you're interested in, then please keep watching. These are the materials I'll be using for this dress, and I have raw silk here. I have 4 yards, but I will not be using all of it. I'll be using about 3 yards, and then I also have taffeta here. Half yard of this is going to be enough, and I have doll face satin here as well, and I have 1.5 yard which is going to be used as lining. I also have this bra cup here. The size of the bra cup you use depends on the bust size you are working with. And then I have this stay here, which is 1 yard, and it's going to be enough for the dress. And then I have a matching thread and a matching zip. I am going to start by drafting the pattern for the top part of this dress, and I'll be starting with the front. I've gone ahead to roll a straight line at the top of my pattern paper to serve as the shoulder line. Then I'll go ahead now to mark the shoulder measurement I am working with divided by 2 on that line. I subtracted ½ inch from what I got on the shoulder measurement divided by 2. So the shoulder measurement I'm working with divided by 2 is 7.5. I subtracted ½ inch to get 7 because this dress is going to be a sleeveless dress. You can go ahead to subtract as much as 1 inch from what you get on your shoulder measurement. Then next I went ahead to mark the shoulder to bust point, shoulder to under bust, and then the shoulder to waist line. And then I also go ahead to label my lines. The first line is the bust point, the second line is the under bust line, and the third line is the waist line. I am going to place my tape on the point where I marked the shoulder measurement and come down by 1 inch. And for the neck width of this dress, I am using 3 inches, and then I will connect from the neck width to the 1 inch I came down by on the shoulder. Next, I will place my tape on the edge of the slope this way, and then I am going to come down by 7.5 inches, which is the armhole measurement I am working with. And then on that point where I marked the 7.5 inches, I am going to be marking the same shoulder measurement I marked at the beginning on the point here, and then I'm going to draw a straight line this way and then connect the line from this point here to the top of the shoulder slope, and I'm going to label the line chest line. Then I am going to measure what I have here and divide it by 2, and then I am going to mark it down this way, and I'll go in on the point by ½ inch. Next, on the chest line here, I am going to mark the bust measurement I am working with divided by 4. 35 by 4 is 8.75. I mark that down, and I'll connect these 3 points together with a curve using my pattern master. After connecting the points, I will mark the nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with divided by 2 on the bust line, and then on the under bust line I am going to subtract ½ inch from what I got, or from what I marked on the bust line. I'll subtract ½ inch from that, and I'll mark it on the under bust and also on the waistline. So the nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with is 7.5 divided by 2 is 3.75, and that was what I marked on the bust point. And on the under bust I subtracted ½ inch from that to mark 3.25 on the under bust and 3.25 on the waistline, and then I use my rule to connect my points. So for this armhole part here, we are now going to measure what we have on the curve and divide it by 2 and then mark it on the line. So we are going to be connecting from that point to the bust point this way. Next, from the dart line here on the waistline, we are going to mark 2 inches, and on the under bust line as well, we'll mark 2 inches from the dart line and connect with a straight line. If you are working with a bigger bust size, you can do 2.5 inches, and then I'll connect from the under bust point this way to the bust point with a curve. And then we are going to come down by 2 inches from the center of this armhole, and we'll mark it down, and then we'll use our rule to connect it from this point that we marked into the bust point this way. After connecting the line, we are now going to replace this that we are taking here. So we are going to replace the 2 inches on this point here following that line. We'll mark it this way and then connect it back into the line this way, and then we are also going to replace the dart on the chest line as well. So this little space that we have here, we're going to measure it and replace it on this chest line this way, and we are going to connect our new armhole. After that, we are going to be marking the neck depth for the front, and I am using 7 inches. I place my tape this way from the shoulder line and mark 7 inches, and then connect it with a slant this way. Our front neckline is going to be a V neckline, that's why it's having this shape. And then we are going to also measure the waist measurement we are working with divided by 4, mark it on the waistline, replace this dart that we took. Remember, we took 2 inches, I replaced it, and then I am now going to connect from this point to the chest line this way. So this part that I am shading is what we are going to be cutting out, and also we are going to be adding our sewing allowance. I'm using 1.5 inches. You can use 2 inches if you want, but I decided to use 1.5 inches for mine. So I'll just connect it this way, and our front pattern is ready. We'll just go ahead to cut this out. So just watch carefully to see the parts that I will be cutting out. I realized that this side piece here is pointy on the bust point, so I'm just going to be giving it a slight curve because we do not want any part of this to appear looking too pointy, and then I am going to cut out. If you've watched this video to this point and you've not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please do well to hit on the subscribe button and also give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful. So that's all for the front. The next thing we are going to be cutting is the back piece, and for this back I've already gone ahead to roll a straight line on the top of the paper to serve as my shoulder line, and I went ahead to mark 1.5 inches from the top and on the down part as well, and I use my rule to connect with a straight line. This is going to serve as the zipper allowance, so we'll be doing all our markings from this line. So I'll go ahead now to mark the shoulder to the waistline that I am working with, the same way we did for the front. And remember, we used 17 inches for the front. We'll do the same for the back as well. Placing the tape on the shoulder line, I will mark 17 inches and then rule a straight line across. After that, I'll go ahead to mark the same shoulder measurement that I used for the front this way, and I'll come down on the point by 1 inch. I will mark 3 inches for the neck width, and then I'll use my rule to connect from the neck width to the 1 inch I came down by on the shoulder. And from this shoulder slope point here, I'll come down by 7.5 inches, which is the armhole measurement that I'm working with. And then I will also go ahead to mark the same shoulder measurement I had marked on the upper part on this part as well. So this is going to serve as our chest line. I just went ahead to confirm the shoulder measurement again, and then I will connect from the top of the slope to this chest line this way. And after that, we are now going to be marking the neck depth for the back piece, and I'm using 1.5 inches. I'll use my rule to just connect it into the neck width, and then after that I'll use my rule to extend the line into the zipper allowance line this way. The next thing I'm going to do is to mark the nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.75. I marked it on the waistline and also on the chest line. Then I'll use my rule to connect with a straight line this way. Then I'll come down by 1 inch from the chest line on the dart line, and also go out and in by 1/2 inch on both sides of the dart legs. And then I'll use my rule now to connect it to that 1 inch that I came down by on the chest line. So this is going to be for our back dart, and then I'll just connect a slight curve here to serve as our armhole for the back. Then I will mark the bust measurement I'm working with divided by 4, the same way I did for the front on the chest line. And then on the waistline, I am going to mark the waist measurement I'm working with divided by 4. I replaced the dart, and then I added sewing allowance. And on the bust measurement, that's on the chest line, I also added my sewing allowance, so do not forget that. Then I'll go ahead to cut this way, and then this is what we have. So for the back, I am going to be going in by 1/2 inch on the center back this way, and then I'll connect with a slant to the top using my rule, and then I'll also go up by about 1 inch this way. So we are doing all of this to reduce or eliminate zipper bulge because the back half length is usually shorter than the front half length. So I'm just going to connect a slant to the side of the back this way, and then I will cut this and also cut this part out. I've gone ahead to cut on my fabric, and this is the center front here. I cut this part on fold, and I added half inch to the front neck depth. This part here I added half inch, but for this side here with the neck width I did not add any allowance. You can go ahead to add yours if you want. I wanted my neck to be a bit wider, and that's why I did not add. Then I added half inch all around the pattern, and for this side piece as well I added half inch all round, but I did not add on the side because I already added all the allowance I needed while cutting on the pattern. I also added half inch on this armhole point here for the back. I did not add on the neck, and then I added on the down part of the back as well, but I didn't add on the side and on the zipper allowance side as well because we already did that while cutting the pattern. So I cut 2 pieces for the lining for the back and also 2 pieces for the main piece for the back. I am also going to be notching the points where my dart is going to be on my main piece, and also the point where the zipper is going to be on my main piece. So this is what we have: 2 for lining and 2 for the main piece. And for the lining I used the door face. This is the side front, and I also have 2 pieces of it. This center front here I have just 1 piece, and I cut it on fold. So these are the linings for the side front. We have 2 pieces of lining and 2 pieces of main fabric. For this center front here we have just 1 piece cut on fold. So this is how it looks after opening it up, and this is the lining as well. I am going to set this aside, and then we are going to cut the down part of this dress. This is the skirt part of this dress, and it is folded into 4. I have an extension for the zipper allowance for the back here, so I went ahead to mark waist measurement I'm working with divided by 4. I added 1.5 inch sewing allowance and then 1 inch for that allowance. I placed 17 inches on the waist of this skirt to get the exact length of this part of the dress that we want, and I want this part to be around 46 inches. I added 1.5 inch to that to make 47.5 inches for all the allowance I'll be needing. The shoulder to her knee line is 40 inches, so that means that I came down by 7.5 inches from her knee line, and then I am going to mark 9 inches from the top of the waistline here to serve as the hip point, and then on the hip point I'll mark the hip measurement I'm working with divided by 4, and I'll also add 1.5 inches for sewing allowance. Then I'll use my rule to connect it this way. So I only want the dart to be on the back part of the dress, and that's why it's looking this way. So we're going to be cutting it off for the front. We do not want that on the front. So I went up from the shoulder to the knee line. I went up by about 4 inches, and then I am going to be marking what I marked on the hip measurement on that line, but I'll subtract 1.5 inches from that to give me the curve that I have here, and then I'll connect it all the way straight down. And then I am going to also come to the part here that is the zip allowance for the back. I will come down by 9 inches, and then I'll mark 1.5 inch on that point, and then on the waistline I will mark about 1 inch, and then I am going to connect it with a slight curve this way. And then on this point here, which is that point where I came up by from the knee line, I will just connect to meet that point. And I came down a little bit because we do not want our slits to be too high. You can even come down more if you want. It's not going to affect anything on the dress because the bubble effect is going to come up a bit, so there'll still be allowance for movement. And then I'll go ahead to cut out. So just watch carefully to see how I'm cutting this out. Sorry that this video is going so fast. I just do not want the length of this video to be too long. So I added my slit a bit on that part. I added my slit because I felt like that was not going to be enough for me, but trust me, your slit can be low, it's not going to affect anything. So I notched the part for zip allowance on the back, and I've taken out the back piece. So this is the front here. I'm trimming off the dart allowance for the front because, like I said, I do not want that to be on the front part of this skirt. I've gone ahead to cut the linings for this, and as you can see, this is how it looks. If you have any questions regarding this, please drop it in the comments. Like I said, I made the video fast because I do not want it to be too long. So these are my pieces, and I've added stay to my pieces. I added 2 layers of stay to the front piece and 1 layer to the lining of the front piece, but for the back I only added 1 layer of stay to the back, and I did not add any stay to the lining of the back. So this is how I'm going to be joining my pieces. I'll repeat the same for all the lining. So after joining, this is what I have here. As you can see, I went ahead to make notches on these points here so that it relaxes on the outer part. But when you're working with raw silk, please do not notch too much. Like, do not cut too much. It's going to affect the outer part and it might start losing. So after that, I'll just go ahead to press open my seam using my tailor's ham. I'll repeat the same on the lining as well, and after pressing, this is what I have, as you can see here. And for the front piece, I used stay to like just press on that seam line of the bust area. I pressed stay on it to flatten it. This is the lining piece, and I'll be adding my bra cups to this piece. So watch how I will be doing that. First off, I will join my cups on the center this way, and this is how it looks after joining it. I will now place my cup, making sure that the base of the cup is touching the underbust line of this lining piece here. If you do not know where your underbust line is, you can mark it while cutting. Make sure that you make a mark so that you will know where it is. So after that, I'll go ahead to also pin the center of the cup, making sure that it matches the center of this piece. And then I'll use my hand now to be pushing this inwards, and then I will pin it, making sure that it relaxes well on the other side as well. So I'm going to pin this carefully, and I'll go ahead to sew it. So if you do not want to sew yours, you can use your needle and thread. If you do not want to sew it with the sewing machine, you can use needle and thread to hand tack it all around. So this is how it looks, and it's laying well for me now. I'll just go ahead to sew it this way, giving it a W shape, something like that. So after sewing it, this is what it looks like. Next thing I'll do now is to trim off the excess on this part of the armhole here, and then I'll repeat the same on the lining as well. Then I will join the lining of the front to the lining of the back on the shoulders, and also repeat the same on the main piece. Join the main piece of the front to the main piece of the back on the shoulders as well. So after joining it, I'll come show you guys how it looks. After joining, this is what I have. As you can see here, I went ahead to press my seam open on the shoulder, and then I'll place it this way, making sure that the shoulders are matching each other, and then I will pin, and then I will pin all around. When you're working with raw silk, make sure that you always pin your pieces. After pinning, I'll go ahead to sew. That's this armhole point here. I'll repeat the same on this side as well. I'll go ahead to pin, making sure that the shoulder matches, and then sew all the way. And then after sewing, I'll just make small notches. Make sure that you do not notch too much. Like I said earlier, I'll just make small notches here, and then I'll go ahead to also pin the neckline of this piece. So you can decide to sew the neckline before you sew the armhole, whichever way you prefer to do yours. So I'll pin this way, and then I'll also make sure that I pin the shoulders as well, making sure that they match each other, and then I'll pin all around. After pinning it down, I'll go ahead to sew it, and then I'll come show you guys how it looks. So after sewing, this is what I have here. I'll just go ahead to make notches. When making notches, you need to be very careful. If you over notch it, it's going to start losing on the outer part. So I'll just go ahead to trim off the excess this way, make small notches on it. And then for the back here, I actually top stitched on the lining of the back after sewing on both sides. So this is how it looks. I'll just go ahead now to flip this over so you guys can see the right side. I'll flip it over and also give it a good press. So after flipping over and pressing, this is what I have. This is the back and this is the front. So what I'm going to be doing next now is to sew the sides. So just go ahead to sew the side of the front this way by about half of an inch, and then repeat the same on the other side as well, so by about half of an inch. For the back piece as well, I'll do the same thing, so by half of an inch. And then on the zipper side of the back, I also sew by half of an inch. So after sewing everything, this is what I have. So just go ahead to turn it over to the right side and give it a good press. After pressing, this is what I have. As you can see here, the top part is almost ready. Next, we are going to be working on the lower part, which is the skirt part. Here I am going to be placing the lining right sides facing each other this way, and then also on the sides this way and on the other side as well. And for the back piece as well, I repeat the same. Place it right sides facing each other, and then sew the sides of the back piece. And then after doing that, I'll come show you guys how it looks. So this is how I'll be sewing this slit point. Sew to this point here, sew this way, and then all the way down, and then sew this side. After joining the linings, this is what I have. I'll just go ahead to turn it over and also give it a good press. So this is the front, and for the back as well, before I turn it over, I'll make a notch on this point here, and then I am going to turn it over, and this is how it looks. I'll give it a good press. Repeat the same on the second back piece as well. Notch it this way, and then turn it over to the right side and give it a good press. So after doing all of that, this is how the back now looks. I'll go ahead to top stitch on these pieces here. That's the waist part of the back, this part here, the down part as well, just to hold it down, and repeat the same on the front, up and down, just top stitch to hold it down. So after doing that, this is what it looks. I will place the both back pieces on each other and mark the zip allowance point. Then I will mark where the dart is supposed to be on the back, which is 3.75. And then on this center back here where the zip is supposed to be, I'll come down by about 0.75 inches and then slant it into the waistline. This is to eliminate zip bulge. So I'll now go ahead to re-notch my zip allowance point this way, and then also notch the dart point this way. After that, I'm going to be taking my darts for the back. I'll just fold it this way. Remember that we notched where the dart is supposed to be, so you just fold it on that point, and then I'll come down by 4.5 inches. That's where the dart is going to stop at. Then I'll sew by half of an inch to the 4.5 inches point, and I'll repeat the same for the other side. So for the back of the top part here, which is the upper part, I'll also mark where the dart is going to be. Remember that I already made a notch on that point, so I used my pattern paper to know how long my back dart is supposed to be. On the pattern paper it's around 7 inches. I added half inch to that because I had added half inch to the down part of the back piece when I was cutting on the main fabric. So I'm just going to sew by half of an inch to where the dart is supposed to stop this way, and then after sewing the dart on the back, we are going to now join our pieces together. So this is the front. We're going to join the upper part of the front to the down part of the front, and also we are going to be joining the upper part of the back to the down part of the back, making sure that the darts are aligning. So I'll repeat the same on the other side of the back as well, and then this is how it looks after joining the upper part of the front to the down part, and also the back to the down part of the back. After that, the next thing we are now going to do is to join the center back and also attach our zipper. So I am going to be fixing my zipper to at around 8 inches below the waistline, around 8 or 9 inches below the waistline. So I'll just join the remaining parts of this point to this slit point here, and then I'll add my zipper to the open part. And then after doing that, this is how it looks. I'm done with the center back, and then this is how the outer part looks. Make sure that you give your fabric a good press after sewing, and also you can go ahead to work with pins as much as you can to have a very neat finish after sewing. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to shape the sides of the dress. So I'll just go ahead now to take my round body measurements, and then I will shape it on both sides. And then after shaping, we can now come and work on the bubble part. So after shaping, this is what I have. here. As you can see, I'll just fold this into two this way so that I can get the center front of this piece. So I'll use my pin to pin this part here just to hold it down together, because I want to start marking the shape for the down part of the dress. I will go ahead to measure to be sure that this is the center of this piece. So go ahead to measure yours when working to be sure that it's the center point. You can even iron it to get the center point. I placed my tape on the waistline this way and came down by about 20.5 inches. That's about 9 inches from the down part, and then I curved it all the way to the back this way, and then I am going to cut this out. So after cutting it out, we are now going to work on the bubble part of the dress. Next thing I'm going to do is to take out my pin, and then I'll go ahead to sew down this part here. If you do not sew it down, it will start losing, and then I will measure what I have on this curved part here, and then I have about 20 inches thereabouts. So I'll multiply it by 2 because this is folded into 2. So I'll go ahead to use it to cut the taffeta. So the taffeta is going to be exactly what you got after measuring the down part of your skirt, plus at least 2 inches or 1 inch allowance. The shorter part on this taffeta is measuring 9.5 inches. So this main piece here, which is the raw silk, I cut it 4 times what I have on the taffeta. 4 times what I have on the taffeta. And then the shorter part of this main piece is measuring 12.5 inches. That is, it is 2.5 inches longer than the taffeta. So I pleated one side of this piece, and then for this top part here, I am going to be sewing it on the wrong side by 1/2 inch this way on both sides, and then I will gather the main piece. I'm going to gather this raw silk part. So I ran a loose stitch on the top part after sewing the sides, and then I will just be pulling it this way. That's how I'll gather it all the way, making sure that the length is the same as what I have on the taffeta. So after doing that, I went ahead to sew it on the taffeta this way, and this is how our bubble looks like. So you can cut your bubble to be longer if you want. So I marked the center of the bubble, and then I'm going to be placing it on the center of this piece. So now this piece here actually went up again by about 2.5 inches because what I had cut earlier was too low for me, but I'll be explaining that at the end of this video. So I went ahead to match the center of my bubble to the center of the piece, and the side of my bubble to the side of, that's to the back of the main piece this way, and I'll pin this side as well. Then I am going to sew it all the way around. If you want your bubble to be longer like the one on the inspo, you can go ahead to cut it at about 15 inches or 16 inches. I used 12.5 inches for mine. So after joining, this is what I have, and as you can see here, from the waist to this point is now 18.5 inches. Remember that when I measured the first time when you guys saw it, was around 20.5 inches, and I went up by 2 inches. That's how I got the 18.5. I did that off camera because what I cut earlier was too low, and this is what I have. This is the final result of our dress. If you're cutting your bubble longer, make sure that your lining for the bubble is at least 2.5 or 2 inches shorter than the main piece. Bye, see you in my next one.